good to be back. It's been a few years since I was a student at this place. And it was interesting. So when I started my study in just general economics, I think there were about 1,000 students, was the main faculty at the Vrije Universiteit. And 6 years later, there were only 2 of those students who graduated also in environmental economics. So it wasn't at the turn of the century not such a hot topic as it is today, which is both concerning as promising. So the challenge has become bigger, but also the response and the attention in education has become bigger. So I think that's a good, a positive development, and that's also an applause for Patricia, this new innovation of DiSC. I congratulate with that. It's really what we need today, since this challenge is bigger than ever. So for the introduction and also for the organization I work for, NL Digital, it's a trade association. Like every country has its trade association for the digital sector. Also collaborate in Digital Europe, but for the Netherlands, NL Digital is the main trade association. Always looking forward, always busy with the latest issues and challenges in policy developments and in businesses. But quite a legacy we found out. So 2 years ago, so it must be around this time that we exist 100 years. Let's have an historian to dive into our archives and find out what our background and legacy is. So we're proud that we exist for over 100 years now. And it started all without energy, without electricity, all mechanical typing machines, calculating machines, and so on. So we've been a long while, and actually here in Amsterdam it started with exhibitions of all kinds of machines and systems that make the workplace more efficient. And there were big efficiency exhibitions also nearby in the Rai. Over 200,000 of visitors came to see the latest innovations in office automation that were offered from our members. At the same time, also in connectivity, great developments. So the same year, 1922, when our association started, also Radio Kootwijk was built, what actually facilitated the intercontinental radio contacts with the Dutch Indies in the Far East. It's an interesting building. It's huge. It's an area of 450 hectares in the middle of the woods of the Veluwe. The size of this place is twice the size of all the data center space in the Netherlands. So we have now this debate with data centers and spatial planning. There used to be times we use more space than we do today, only just because we wanted to send a short message to the other side of the world. And we now do by fiber, and we do by satellites. So things changed, but it was a nice setting for our anniversary party we had with the members. Top right is a picture of the exhibition we have at our office. So you're interested in the legacy of 100 years of digital appliances and collective efforts, then you're more than welcome to visit our place. So quite some changes over the past 100 years, of course, and NL Digital it is today. It's interesting to see, indeed, it started with hardware, and then in the 70s, 80s, COSO was a trade association of software developing and deploying companies. And after all the mergers and so on, in the end, we now have NL Digital. So back to sustainability, the topic of today. After all these efficiency exhibitions that make work more efficient, we also started to look at how efficient can we handle resources, how can we more efficiently also manage energy. And actually the resource side came first. And it was also driven by legislation, first Dutch legislation, later followed by European legislation on producer responsibility for ICT hardware, or actually for all electronics. So all producers that put electronic devices on the market are also responsible for the take-back and recycling of those appliances. And it is pretty hard to get all your stuff back that you put on the market. So it needs to be collectively organized by collection schemes where consumers can drop off their device after usage. And this task was taken up by the Trade Association. So we started this collection scheme for ICT hardware back at the turn of the century. And since then, over 300 million kilograms of ICT hardware were collected. 250 million kilograms were recycled. So the material was gained from these recycling activities. And this is, of course, an important way to make sure that the resources you use in ICT hardware are handled most efficient. Not the end of the story. I get back to this topic later, but at least it's one of the activities that we took from the Trade Association. On energy and climate, interesting enough, this was a topic that only came 10 years later on the agenda. It was a bit below the radar. It was not that big by then. But after a couple of studies, we thought, okay, it's also good that the digital sector joins all the agreements that already were in place with different kind of industries to become more energy efficient in a structural way. So in a cycle of 4-year planning, there were plans and executions of energy efficiency measures. And the biggest companies, energy-using companies in the sector, joined this agreement. And later also we get involved, of course, in the policy making. We are a trade association, so also in the agreements. The results I explain a bit later, but I think it's very interesting that after this long-term agreement within the sector, we also have now co-founded and joined these initiatives that are much broader, up to the national coalition that is very important new development for the next time. So sustainability, 3 core topics. So I mentioned energy and climate and resource and circularity, but the other side of the enabling side that Patricia also mentioned is even more important. So I touched on those examples later, but I think an interesting trigger you just mentioned, Rick, is that the benefit of ICT, or dysfunction in ICT, put airplanes on the ground. So I think there was a lot of environmental benefits from that bug. But I'll also explain the more positive side of enabling sustainability for ICT. So sustainability, already SDGs mentioned today, is broader than just the environmental aspects. It also covers topics like diversity and inclusion, where we also have activities from our organization. One I'd like to mention is that started at the turn of COVID, so 3 years ago, that we asked our members to donate laptops after use to refurbish and redistribute to people in need who were not connected to schooling or education. So in this program, 15,000 laptops are now donated and redistributed. And the good thing is that now the government also get more enthusiastic about this program and promise to deliver us the next 3 years 50,000 laptops per year to put in this program and to redistribute to people in need. So I think it's both from inclusion to make sure that everyone get along with the digital connectivity and digital developments, but also from an environmental point of view, of course, great to have lifetime extension for those devices. Yeah, back to the data. What we're talking about in the Netherlands when it comes down to energy, CO2 and electricity. I think interestingly enough, this is monitored now in a dashboard called the Climate Monitor in the Netherlands. And what you see is that our sector that's covered by information and communication has increased slightly over the past years after a decade that had been quite stable. Although the data growth has been 30–40% over the year on. So both in networking, in storage, in computing, this data growth didn't really lead to much energy growth till 5 years ago. I think now we have seen, mainly also through cloud adoption, that a lot of workloads that were outside the ICT sector in the enterprise environments now come in our statistics in our data centers. So I think that's one, it's not only an increase, but it's also a shift. And the second development that explains this rise is also the shift from companies to the Netherlands that used to be in other countries. So we have some large data centers, of course, that were built over the past years. Large data centers, hyperscales that really make a difference now also in this statistics, but also contribute to shift workloads from enterprise environments to their central clouds. All over, it's still only 1%. You could say, okay, what are we talking about? And in CO2, yeah, the problem will solve itself. As long as the electricity will become greener, we will be fine, because we only use electricity. We don't use much gas, we hardly use diesel, we have no a nitrogen issue. So what's the big issue? First of all, it doesn't go all the way down, the CO2 footprint of electricity in the Netherlands. So we put on the coal plants again. So there's still work to be done in getting more renewable electricity. But also the places where we use electricity, the grid is, of course, has its challenges. But all those developments from renewables, from all those locations that will electrify, that used to use fossil fuels, that will use electricity. So we're in a frame and in a grid where there are other competitors for electricity besides our sector that we have to take into account, of course. Yeah, so focusing on electricity, you see indeed a more steep growth over these past 5 years. So here that's up to over 44% of the national electricity usage for our sector. And if you break down, and that is interesting enough, that is now monitored since a few years by the National Statistics Bureau. I think little countries in Europe have these insights. It will change, of course. There will be requirements for data centers to report on the energy usage based on the revised Energy Efficiency Directive. But for now, I think the Netherlands has these insights. It counts up to the total that 3/4 of the total electricity usage in the ICT sector, that consists of over 100 companies, is concentrated with the data centers, like 200 data centers in the Netherlands. Of over 50 are considered large, using more than 10 gigawatt hours in 50 locations. So it's quite concentrated, which is both efficient and both can be a challenge when it comes down to supply in the grid and make sure the growth can be facilitated. On the other hand, as mentioned, the grid in the Netherlands will be more sustainable in a very fast way. So the latest numbers, 2021, 1/3 of the electricity in the Netherlands was from renewable sources. In 7 years, 2030, it should be over 80%. So this is indeed a growth also that's more steep even than the growth of the electricity need of our sector. So in that way, it's still a promising outlook that the source of energy for our industry will become more renewable. And we play a part in that as well by sourcing this renewable energy and make sure these new wind parks can be built for our needs. As mentioned, we've been in this program with the government for over 12 years to strictly become more energy efficient, along with a lot of other industries and also services sectors, like the universities. I think they're somewhere along this, wetenschappelijk onderwijs. So the VU as well joined this program for structural energy efficiency improvements. I think our members from the telco companies, data centers and large IC service providers have done a great job in this program with over 40% energy efficiency improvement. What's just the accumulation of reported measures. It's not like the general hardware refresh, but that's all specific energy measures they put in the program and they executed over the past years. And I think thanks to this program, I think we're among the most energy efficient data centers in Europe. And I'm really looking forward to those new figures when data centers start reporting. I hope to have also facts on this statement. And besides the energy usage, it's also the green energy procurement, which is high on the agenda. That 95% of all the electricity sourced in our sector is from renewable sources, either in the Netherlands, both from the wind parks that are built now, to certificates. But just as mentioned, it was just internally in the sector. And thanks to this success, also if you consider a data center, we started with a situation that a data center used the same amount of electricity to run the IT and to cool it. After this program now, we are in a situation that on an average 80% is for the IT and only 20% is for the cooling. So this cooling and infra has become more and more efficient over the past decade. What means that if looking forward, if you want to make a big difference, you can not only keep looking at this latest or last improvements in this infrastructure, you also have to look to the ICT load itself. And there we're back at the software and hardware that in the end determine the workload, energy usage, and the amount of cooling that's needed. And then you don't only have a data center as a partner to work on an energy program, you also need those end users. You need the hardware vendors, you need software and VM solutions to make sure the IT load energy usage will go down. So at that time, we were really pleased that we could start a collaboration with the Amsterdam Economic Board in the LEAP program, because they have all those different actors in the digital chain, also in their memberships, and combined with the members from our sector, we had a great platform to start new initiatives across the the digital chain, beyond the scope of our own operations in infrastructure. Which after a few years, we're now at the next step in even a broader coalition with a national coalition on sustainable digitization, where of course also the fee is part of. So really pleased to collaborate here as well. So yeah, a few words on what we achieved within LEAP. I think Patricia already mentioned the great paper on the trends and scenarios, where together with Photon Delta, we looked okay, what will be the short-term and mid-term, long-term developments that can improve sustainability of the digital sector even further, and on different aspects of technical and societal environmental solutions. They provided a great overview. I think in this domain, very concrete research studies were done on, for instance, the technology side. So both on current technologies and new technologies. So on current technology, we focus on power management of servers. So what power management settings can be applied with the help of the vendors and of hardware and software. They provided the guidance. Measurements were done at some of the partners of the LEAP consortium, and a manual turned out as a guidance for other end users to check and improve their power management settings. And besides managing this amount of energy used, I think a new element is also the timing and the place of energy usage that become increasingly important in the next decade. So you think you've been there now with energy efficiency. The next challenge, the next feature will be not only how can it use as little energy as possible, but how can I use it at a time that the supply of renewable energy is abundant? And how can I distribute my computing or my calculations to a place where at that time the energy is abundant? So also the placing and the timing of energy will be a new element that becomes more relevant than just the amount of energy you use in a new sustainable energy grid. And that was also a background of a study, how can we also look for more decentral data centers. So there's on one hand, there's mega efficient, hyper efficient, hyperscale data centers. On the other hand, There is a very local, integrated, inbuilt society data center where reuse of heat is very much possible. Was also an interesting part of the spectrum of optimal integration of energy and digitization. So that was the topic of the study on local data centers. On technology, new technologies, photonics is of course a great promise. And a lot of research is done in the Netherlands by the consortium of Photon Delta. And since we have a consortium with end users and a lot of companies that use technology that's available today, the key question was, okay, what of those nice promises are already available today or can be used on the market? So I think a great study was done to make the inventory with all the vendors and hardware developers that which routers, which switches, which receivers are already based on photonics that can be applied in a data center. So how can light become more inside the data center than just used for the networking, but also closer to the final computing power that a server has. So there's a few examples of the studies done over the past years within LEAP. So I hope this will be continued in the framework of the National Coalition on Digital Digitization with all the partners we have on board, including, of course, DiSC. Another topic, we're talking about energy a lot now, and resource and circularity is another topic that becomes increasingly important, although it's already on the agenda for 25 years. It will be the next challenge. So energy will be renewable and sufficient in the end. In the end might be in 10 years. Then we have quite abundant supply of renewable energy from the North Sea and from all our solar panels and so on. So the real big challenge is the not renewable, the not sustainable resources and materials to build our IT equipment and to build these renewable production locations. So the material side of things is equally important as the energy side of things. So yeah, just to give you a glimpse of the system in place. So yes, indeed, there's over 10,000 collection points of ICT hardware. We store it and we recycle where we can. We also have focus, of course, for reuse of parts, reuse of devices. And this is a activity that's still important. Although all the attention now, of course, goes to the better circular options that you will recognize probably from the Ellen MacArthur butterfly model, then we consider recycle still as an important step. But the longer you can extend that by first reusing or repairing stuff, of course, the better. At least as if it's an equally energy efficient solution. Of course, it doesn't. You shouldn't use inefficient equipment as long as possible. So there's a trade-off in material efficiency and energy efficiency. But overall, when energy usage is not the main part in the use phase, then it makes sense to extend lifetimes of hardware by all those tactics you have in reuse, repair, refurbish, or remanufacturing. That is very well business as usual. This is not something new because now circularity is a new topic. It's not that we now started this kind of initiatives. If you look how our servers are handled, our multi-copiers are handled. For years there have been take-back programs with the vendors, really professional remanufacturing locations in Europe where this equipment is repaired and reused and resold. Then on the enabling side of things. So I think this graph kind of summarizes the hundreds of pages of the climate agreement and the role of digital in this field. So summarize the energy part we just discussed about greening of ICT. In the end, It's about sustainable energy in, efficiency use in the sector, and when it's appropriate, reuse of heat out of data centers. Whether it's internally or externally, there are opportunities, and more than about a dozen cases today where waste heat of data centers is reused in the surrounding buildings. But I want to talk from now on the other side of the sustainability, greening by ICT. So the 5 domains mentioned here are also 5 domains that are used in the DiSC studies of Smarter 2030. Global E-Sustainability Institute did some studies on what is the impact of digital solutions on CO2 reduction in various domains, and those 5 domains are actually the same as the 5 tables we had at the climate agreement. So it's about facilitating a smart energy system that enables renewable energies to be adopted. It's about saving transport kilometers and fuels in transportation. It's smart logistics, but also mobility solutions, but also avoiding mobility. So all the homeschooling and homeworking we've done saved a lot of CO2, of course, but we could still do our work thanks to the digital solutions. In industry, where the majority of the electricity usage is, more efficient motor management systems enabled by ICT management has quite a big potential, since it's a big numbers you talk about there. Built environment, buildings, smart buildings. Study after study shows that 20–30% can be gained if building energy management is improved by ICT solutions. And also in agriculture, precision farming can avoid a lot of water and seeds waste there. So yes, digital is everywhere, can contribute everywhere, but how can we improve and how can we also quantify the impact of these benefits? It was easier to monitor the energy uses of a data center than to monitor the positive impact of a digital solution in a certain domain. But some studies have been done in the Netherlands, especially the one I mentioned on motor management, quite a potential of on CO2 reduction. That if you count it, you add it up, it's even more than the CO2 impact of the digital sector in the Netherlands itself. And this is only an example of a few studies that started quantifying the positive impact that digital solutions have in these domains. The same accounts for circularity. The digital solutions also facilitate more circular solutions. So it gains insight in the materials used that enables better reuse of materials, but also the way platforms facilitate reuse and sharing of goods. An interesting calculation was done by a Dutch second-hand platform, Marktplaats, what the CO2 saved by reusing all those traded stuff is. That could be up to 1 megatons of CO2. And that's quite substantial if you consider that CO2 in the Netherlands is about 180 megatons. So only the reuse of stuff traded by the platform could save 1 million tons of CO2 compared to buying new stuff. And there are dozens, or I think about 150 trading and sharing platforms today that are used in the Netherlands. So this is another way that digital solutions enable circular economy. So to summarize, I think from the perspective of the digital sector, yes, we have been taking our responsibility over the past years for our own impact on materials and energy. We will continue to do so. So that's also why we're so engaged in this new platforms we can collaborate in. But the decoupling of data and energy remain a challenge. So this data growth will continue. So we will need these services to make our work and our country and sustainable challenges more efficient. So yes, some elements we new agreements on how we legally deal with things, how we work together, new initiatives like the ones we discussed today, innovations, of course, like the research really needed on more efficient hardware, software we just learned. And it also requires investments. So a lot of our members really have now investment programs for the next years, how to replace equipment to become more energy efficient, really pushed by the prices of today, of course, but it's not something new, it's something that they've done for decades, but of course these prices give a new boost and a new equation when it comes down to business cases. And also on this enabling side, I think it would be really great to have better quantified insights and what this positive impact is. Also to have to write policy measures to even better stimulate and coordinate these efforts. And I think also here is where the National Coalition can contribute in both the further efficiency improvement of our sector, but also in quantifying and stimulating the enabling side of ICT in close collaboration with the government. So with that, to end indeed, it's also a handout and a shout out to the government to work together on this in this field, because it really is this twin transition. It's where the big challenges come together, and but the practice is that when it's on both sides, then it's on no side. So it really is that it's things have to come together. We are organized now, so we really hope the government will join here as well. So that's what I like to share from the efforts from our industry in the Netherlands over the past years. So I hope it gives a good illustration of the field we work and how we like to go forward.